your family and how your family history and the mental, cognitive sort of way of thinking affects who you are as a person, and how that stems back not from like you to your mother, but also your mother to your grandmother. So it's kind of like this reverse domino effect of looking back into the past and thinking about who you are based off of all these previous lives that have been lived.
Welcome to What's My Thesis? I'm your host, Javier Proenza. Every week, my guests and I share the answers we found to the questions we have. Join us as we explore and expand our worldview and ask, what's my thesis? And today, my guest is May Roded.
Yes.
Oh, nailed it. We are back at the Artist Co-op. We just saw Juan Gomez, sorry. We just saw Juan Gomez, and he fucked up my last name too.
Like I said, last names are hard. If we're all just on the same page about it, I think it's fine.
So yeah, we're here at the Artist Co-op with you in your studio. Your main practice seems to be mostly printmaking, and you work as a printer, you mentioned,
yes.
in Santa Monica area.
Yes. So I am a printmaker. I have some photo background, and I do a lot of drawing. Drawing incorporates itself into printmaking in many ways. Mm-hmm. And I am a shop manager at Josephine Press in Santa Monica. So it's a full service printmaking facility. We're the most community-based printmaking studio out in that area. So a lot of artists, when you say like, oh, I want to have an edition made, or like I want to learn how to do some printmaking that's outside of the university system, you have to be invited typically to a big printing press like Gemini GEL or...
Is that... I know Cirrus used to be called Gemini. Is that what they go by?
Cirrus Gallery. That's another.
Okay.
So that's another independent press.
They're not considered a big one. They're considered.
They are.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Yeah,
because they're another big one. Yeah,
they work with like huge people.
Yes. Yeah.
There's also shout out to Aliso Editions, which is a new one that came out of the Cirrus.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that.
Although I don't know how they feel about each other. Oh, I mean, they're probably fine. It's a very diplomatic world.
Yes. There's also Hamilton Press, who. My friend Tyler, who also teaches at Loyola Marymount University, is the master printer there. And anyways, there's all these other big presses that you have to be invited to have an edition made. But at Josephine Press, John Greco, he's the owner, and he opened the shop about almost 40 years ago. And he wanted it to...
4 or 40?
40.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to be clear because there's a distinction there.
Yes. Many years ago, 40 years ago.
And I was maybe 2 years old when he put that up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, he moved out here.
You weren't even alive.
I wasn't even alive.
Wow.
I was a thought in the ether somewhere. But anyways, he wanted a shop for anyone to come in and make a print. He wanted them to have access to that. So he opened Josephine Press, and it's very community-based. It's very like open to workshops. So anyone can come in, whether you have experience or not, and you can take a workshop like etching, monoprint, relief, all these different practices.
Do you guys do lithographs and whatnot?
Lithographs are the most difficult to operate a space for. So we do like pronto plate lithography, which is kind of tricky and also really basic. Like you can draw on a sensitive sheet of, it's basically like a polyester film that is sensitive to grease, and you can draw on it, and then whatever your image is going to be the positive that will be printed. Mm-hmm. You could do photographic imagery that way by running the sheet of, it's like a pronto plate is what it's called. You run it through a laser printer, and so the toner then fuses to the paper, and then you ink it up and print it the way you would a lithograph. But they're very finicky. Like a lot of printmakers that I talk to say they either work or they don't work. So
this version of the lithograph. Okay. What makes the lithograph? Now I'm fascinated. What makes the lithograph so difficult?
Well, okay, so lithography it's a planographic process. So you're not like carving anything, you're not scratching anything, you're just drawing on a flat surface, which is a sheet of limestone or like a really thick stone. Mm-hmm. And you have to polish the surface, so you grind it down so it's free of any grease, it's nice and smooth. And then you draw on it with greasy material. So there's what's called lithocrayons, and those are, a specific grease level. There's 1 through 5. 1 is going to be the most greasy, so it'll give you the darkest values, and there's 5, which is the least greasy and will be the lightest values. And then there's all these other things in between. And basically,
sorry, go ahead.
You draw your image and then you etch it onto the stone. So you use nitric acid, and you're basically telling the stone what's going to be what. And then the areas that you leave alone, those won't print. So once you've etched it, you then wet the surface of the stone. So it's kind of like the idea of oil versus water. So wherever you had your grease material, when you roll ink onto the stone, the ink sticks to those areas, versus where the stone is wet, because the ink is oil-based, it will repel because water repels oil, right? So when you roll the ink on, it sticks into the areas where you have your drawing, gets repelled, and then you do this process of sponging and inking the plate repetitively. And then you put your paper on it, and then you run it through the press. So you need like a really good facility just for that process.
Yeah. No, it sounds pretty intense. But it also sounds like what you're saying is that it's not too different from just when you're using the similar like resin on something so that the acid burns it, like the metal. I'm so dumb.
That's okay. I am here to talk about every print process. It's like my passion.
No, so etching, just regular etching, but without like scraping, etching with like acids. It sounds it's a similar process, or is it not? It's because it sounds like maybe in this case you're not deteriorate like.
So etching is usually on a sheet of metal like zinc or copper. And with zinc, you do use nitric acid, which is the same acid you would use to etch a stone. But with the stone, you're just kind of doing chemical reactions with
you're not melting away stone.
Right.
Okay.
So
that answered question.
Exactly. Yeah. With etching, the zinc literally eats into the plate where you have it exposed, where the acid is. So then it creates a line where ink can be pushed into and wiped the surface clean, and then run through the press. So that's a really dumbed down version of it.
Okay.
But yeah.
But I'm getting a real strong sense that to you, there's maybe nothing more satisfying than pulling something out of the press.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It's funny. I work with an artist and she says, every time we pull a print, it's like Christmas.
I know.
It is. It's like, that's what keeps a lot of printmakers going, I think, is like that moment where all that hard work that you put into your plate, all the ink that you thought of, like the color and the transparency, and like having to go through the whole process of inking it up and then running it through the press. And then that last moment is pulling it off and just being like, there it is.
Yeah.
You know?
But we also forget that it's like it's the way that a lot of stuff used to be printed, and it has like a really like rich advertising, like, you know, like as opposed to just like painting or anything like that. It has a finish to it that I like, that I think I'm excited. Now I'm like, I've been painting the drawings that I do, and now I'm like, maybe I want to fucking print them.
Yeah, I think everyone should do a little bit of printmaking.
I might come out to your spot.
Please do,
and try to do that. So,
yes.
So that's really fun. I mean, that seems like you have a pretty fulfilling life for someone of your generation, where the whole world is falling apart, and you get to have like. I mean, I'm not that the world falling apart doesn't affect you, but I'm saying like you're doing pretty good. It sounds like.
Yeah.
You hear all about these millennials being lazy. It seems like you have an idyllic like setup for yourself.
I'm definitely really fortunate to be in the spot that I'm in.
I'm not guilt tripping you. I'm giving you props.
I appreciate it.
I'm not saying privilege. I'm saying like, hey, you, because it's hard to know. Like, I mean, I'm just imagining based on your lack of crow's feet how young you are.
Well, yeah, I'll disclose. I'll be 30 next year.
Oh, okay.
So,
you actually seem a lot younger, but still,
really?
30, a good printmaking career at 30 is not bad.
Yeah. Well, so the reason I say I'm really fortunate is because right out of my BFA program, I got a teaching assistantship at Loyola Marymount University. And then a year later, they started giving me my own classes with just my BFA. So I don't even have my MFA. And then a couple years after that, I was offered the position to be a shop manager at Josephine Press. And then with that, I've been instructing workshops there. And I'm a real go-getter. Like, I was raised to really just like, if you want something, just go do it. And it's okay, great. So I've always like really had that mindset. And so what you're saying of like my position of where I am in life and how I get to do what I love is really something that I am really grateful for, that I've worked hard for. But then the other side of it is like, where does this go now? And I mean, I feel good about my future, obviously, but at the same time, it is like the state of the world and the economic system and everything. It is kind of scary to think about, like, how do we take this art career that I'm in, really invested in, and turn it into something long term that's like similar positions.
So are you speaking more of because right now we're talking about two different things. You have your practice, which is printmaking, and then you have your job. So when you're saying what next, you're talking about the art career, or are you talking about what next professionally in terms of, because I mean, I'm sure you could just become a badass master printer.
Yeah, I mean, that's the game plan.
Okay. That you're talking more in the art then. That's where it's a little bit more ambiguous for you?
I think a little bit of both.
Okay. All right. So, I'll let you speak.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it is connected too. It's like a lot of folks that teach for their career, don't have time for their own work, which is something that I struggle with as well, of course. I think being young is like the benefit of having a little bit more energy at the end of the day after teaching 2 classes or, teaching workshops over the weekend. And like, you have to just find the time. So you come in at night or you really take your weekend time that it should maybe be just like, go hang out at the park and read a book. Instead, you like get into the studio. And
you're always working when you're an artist, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Which, yes, I can relate to that.
Totally. Yeah.
But I want to reassure you because you just saw a 40-year-old man break a sweat setting all this shit up. So I don't think that ambition is going to leave you. It's either in you or it's not.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I mean, that's really fascinating. We could definitely talk about printmaking a little bit more. I am curious about topic, though. Did you have a topic ready for today?
Well, okay, it's maybe a little bit like a wide range.
That's perfectly fine.
Okay, so...
You don't need to start apologizing for your topic just yet.
Okay,
let's see it first. No, I'm kidding.
Well, I don't know. It's like, so I really got into Russian Doll recently, which is a Netflix series.
Okay.
And there's like a lot of themes in that show that I relate to in my own artwork. And I kind of am picking up on and trying to shift my work in a different direction that relate to the theme. So I don't know if we want Russian Doll to be...
That's fine. I mean, like if we can do it without giving too many spoilers, like, because I don't want to enrage listeners.
Yes, no.
But now I'm actually kind of curious. Okay, so what's the premise of the show?
So basically, there's 2 seasons. They're both a little... One plays off of the other. So the first season is about this woman in her 40s. And she is like an okay person. She's like someone that kind of isn't a great friend, but is there and just trying to live her life. And she has like a lot of childhood trauma from her family and her upbringing and all this and that. And on her like 42nd birthday or something like that, she dies. And then she wakes up again at her birthday party. And then she's like, okay, that's a bit odd. And so then she like continues to live her night. And then again, she dies. And then like this repetition of her dying over and over again that same night during her birthday.
Is it the woman from the Orange is the New Black?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember when this came out.
Yeah.
This is like older though, right?
It's older, but the second season
just came out.
And so the second season, so without giving away many spoilers, the second season talks more about, okay, so the end of the first season talks about how to become a better person and to live your life to what it should be,
That woman's in her 40s, that actress?
No, just the character of her.
But how old? I mean, she's...
Natasha Lyonne.
She's playing old. Usually actresses don't play up in age because
Yeah,
it like ages them. Anyway, I'm sorry. Now I'm getting into like patriarchy.
No, it's all good. I think
she just seems really young for like to be playing a 40-year-old. But maybe I'm just like...
I don't know, actually.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, she's been around. I've definitely seen her act for a long time.
Yeah.
So maybe she is closer to 40 than I recognize.
I think she's older than 40, but I don't know. I'm not sure.
All right.
Anyway, maybe she's around there.
This is probably getting cut out.
Sure.
This digression.
She's somewhere in there because I remember I've been watching some interviews of her recently when she was younger, and I was like, whoa, like she used to. I only knew about her when she started doing Orange is the New Black, and then when this series came out, I was like, this is crazy. So
yeah, no, she's super charismatic. I think when I saw her in that show, like in Orange is the New Black, I recognized her. I still don't know what from, but I've seen her in something else. But anyway,
Sure.
so back to Russian Doll.
So, okay, so then the first season ends, and this idea of like learning to become a better person, basically, and learning how to live your life and wanting to live your life. And the second season is more about how your family and how your family history and the mental, cognitive sort of way of thinking affects who you are as a person, and how that stems back not from like you to your mother, but also your mother to her grandma or your grandmother. So your mother to her mother, and then her mother to her mother. So it's kind of like this reverse domino effect of looking back into the past and thinking about who you are based off of all these previous lives that have been lived, and how to then work into your present and your future, and have to carry the trauma that you had and that your mother had in previous and still live a life that feels like fulfilling enough, carrying all this trauma and learning how to live with all of it, and recognizing that you aren't able to really change the past. You're only able to change yourself in the future and the present.
Yeah. I mean, are we going to get into your trauma?
Not trauma necessarily, but I'm really into psychology and like cognitive thinking. And so what I really love about the show is like all these themes that hit on how it is that you look into your past and how your family relates so much into like, so my work when I was in undergrad was all about, my parents are from Israel originally, and they moved out here in the 90s, American dream, got a house, raised a family of 3 kids, and then housing crash in 2008, and kind of spiraled. And so my parents in the mid 2010s decided like, we're going to move back to Israel. We're kind of done here. And I was in my mid 20s at the time, and I was in school at the time. And so it kind of affected me because it's like, I grew up in this house, and now the house is being disassembled and all the materials are being moved away, the furniture that I grew up with.
I thought you meant the house was literally being
not the house itself. That's an interesting visual. Yeah.
I got you. I was like, holy shit. Were they just moving the house to Israel?
Yeah, the whole house.
Like my imagination went a little crazy. Okay. So one thing that we talked about before we started recording that I did mention that I wanted to talk about on the show. So you were saying, because the grandfather moved the first time to Israel. He was not Israel born. He moved from Italy, you said.
Yes.
And I was like, interesting, because I would like guess the era, right? It's like the 50s, where it was probably still not chill to be a Jew in Italy, even though it was over, and still probably like, I could still see some resentment.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the having to carry.
And the Italians, they get a pass sometimes on their anti-Semitism because they didn't have concentration camps until the Germans put them in there. But they had ghettos. Yeah,
I mean, just the whole so the grandfather on my father's side, he's the one from Italy, but my grandfather on my mother's side was actually in a concentration camp. And so this whole move that my parents had taken to move back to Israel made me think a lot about my family history. And so that's when I kind of delved into like, who were my grandparents and what did they live through? And so it all kind of carries back into today of thinking like, I am the person that I am because of who my mother and father are and who their mother and father are, and having to carry all of the history of being a Jewish American. And my parents are immigrants, were. And so I'm like the firstborn American. And so like having that privilege too, but then also having to carry all the history of being Jewish and then
also American-Israel relations towards the rest of the world are kind of awkward right now.
Yeah.
Which we don't have to get into. I don't want to get you in trouble, but I'm saying like it's not unweighted, because it's like at the same, it's there's trauma, but then there's like a reaction to the trauma that you also have to kind of deal with, which I'm sure is not easy.
Yeah. My parents didn't raise me to be very religious. Like we only celebrated holidays, and very rarely I would go to temple. I went to Hebrew school, but that was basically it for like 2-3 years. And so I know how to speak Hebrew fluently. I know most of the holidays, but that's about it. And so when it comes to like the politics of it, I'm really a bit in the dark about all that.
Yeah.
Probably more so to my doing because I don't really get invested in that kind of stuff. So I guess for me, it's more about like my personal history to who my grandparents were. But of course, I know, a fair amount about the history of everything. And
well, one of the things that we talked about off the air as I was like, because I set up for 45 minutes, so it's
Yes,
not like we
that's
sit in
right.
silence. But the idea of also the difference between Israel in the 50s and Israel now, like when Zion was becoming a reality, it must have been really like it didn't have all the baggage yet.
right.
Oh, I mean, there was probably some baggage being acted out because obviously putting a sort of European state in the middle of the Middle East is going to be an issue, but it must have been like really like validating or vindicating or something, like in terms. I mean, I can only imagine what it must be like to like be persecuted and then finally have a fucking home.
Yeah. Well, so when Israel first became a state, or even just like so basically when kibbutzim started to crop up in Israel, and a kibbutz is basically a very small community that's run almost like communist style where you trade goods for services. There's not really monetary value to many things, at least back in the day. Like, for example, my dad didn't even know what money was until he moved to
and
to
the
Europe.
stereotypes that Jews face.
Oh my God.
They're like, we're talking about communities that don't even have cash.
Yeah. When they first got started and everything. And so my grandfather, my father on my dad's side moved from Italy to Israel, the very north. It's this kibbutz called Hagoshrim, and it means the bridges. Hageshel is the bridge in Hebrew.
How's your Hebrew?
It's pretty good.
Okay, it sounds like it.
Yeah.
I don't hear like an Americanized accent.
Yeah, thank you. It's funny because when I talk to folks out here, they're like, "Oh, you speak it so fluently," and I mean, almost as though I like to say that my first language was Hebrew because my parents would talk to me in Hebrew, and then once I entered the school system, that's when I really learned how to speak English.
Same thing with Spanish for me.
Oh, cool.
No.
Yeah, and I love that. Like being bilingual is awesome, and it just is a really nice thing. But yeah, I was
although Spanish is spoken a lot more internationally.
Yeah, and out here,
Israel is like more like, or Hebrew is more like Italian, where it's like you only speak it in like very select places. Definitely,
yeah.
Do you guys is there like a really big industry for Hebrew translation of movies?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Because like it's one of the biggest things in Italy is like a whole industry of like celebrities that are voiceover artists, and they voice the same actors, or they voice like it's one guy would do the voice of Stallone, Dustin Hoffman, and someone else. I forget who. Let's just say, but anyway, and they would put marathons of movies based on the guy. So it would be like a Dustin Hoffman movie, a Stallone movie, and then some other disparate actor.
Oh, how funny. Wow.
So I would imagine like with language being, but I mean, I feel like a lot of people in Israel speak English anyway, though.
Yeah. So how like out here in California, when you take a second language, it's usually Spanish or there's like French or Italian or whatever. In Israel, you take English and Arabic. So it's kind of like out there, most people speak English as well. At least they had to take a few years in school. And I think English speakers are able to get around Israel pretty easy too. Like there's Birthright, which is like the free trip to Israel if you have any inkling of Jewishness in you.
I'll take a free trip.
Yeah, it's awesome. I did it when I got out of high school with some friends, and it's like they take you to all the tourist spots. They pay for everything, all the food, all the stay. You go to the Dead Sea, you ride a camel, everything.
You ride a camel?
Yeah, it's part of it.
That's such a funny detail.
I mean, there are pictures, that's what they use to advertise it, is like all these kids on camels.
That's hilarious. I don't know why that tickles me so much. That is such a great detail, though. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, but it's also like with the intention. It is sort of like a propagandistic trip as well, right?
It is, yes. So then they bring like
they don't take you to Palestine and go like, "Yo, check it out."
No, but they bring like IDF soldiers on like halfway through the trip, and they're like, "Oh yeah," like, and they, IDF soldiers carry guns with them, and out here for us, that's something that's like someone with a gun. I mean, with today's politics, not even politics, just the life that we live today and guns, and it's really bad. But in Israel, we see people carrying guns around, and it's just part of the security of the
Yeah.
nation. But the whole kind of like subplot of the trip is to try to entice people to move to Israel, because look at all this amazing stuff that we have here, and look, you were just paid to stay out here for 10 days and ride a camel and get in the ocean, and it really is a beautiful place, and I think everyone should visit it at least once if they can.
Well, I mean, it's a super important place. I think, like, in terms of places to visit, it's definitely in my list of like, no, I'm fucking curious.
Yeah.
I want to go to Istanbul. Like, I love, I mean, just because of a place's politics doesn't mean that I'm like not interested in seeing it.
Yeah.
Especially because it's like, it's got that Mediterranean vibe that I think is like its own little Italy.
Yeah.
Just like landscape wise, it sounds charming as fuck.
Yeah.
I can see why people fight over this shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's so, I just got back from a 2-week trip out there because my family lives there now.
Yeah.
And I haven't been since pre-COVID started. So it was really nice to kind of be there. It's like my second home, basically.
Yeah.
But like Tel Aviv is amazing. The water is so warm at the in the ocean, and the weather is hot during the summer. But you indulge in iced coffees and the water. And my parents living in the north, there's a lot of rivers that run through there, and anyways, and Jerusalem, of course, is like a must and all that.
Yeah. Well, I want to redirect you back to the
Yes.
history of your grandfather, because that's kind of where we got distracted by, I think,
Yes.
language.
Yes.
So you were a native speaker of Hebrew,
Yes.
because you're in the household. Your first word was what?
Oh, I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know.
Mine was zapato.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Mine was
great.
shoe.
Oh, cute. Zapato. Oh, I love that. Man, I don't know. I should ask my parents what my first word
my
was. I
God.
don't even
Text
know.
them right now. We'll wait. No, I'm kidding.
Okay. They're probably up. Oh my gosh, what a great question.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask them.
Because I'm guessing if your first language was Hebrew, it wasn't in English.
Yeah. Well, if it was mom or dad, which I'm assuming, I think probably those are the first words that your parents try to get you
You
to
weren't
say.
into footwear as a baby?
No, not as much.
I was destined to love sneakers and not be
that's-
able to. But although I'm not like a sneakerhead.
That's so funny. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And I like to say it with a Z.
Zapato.
Instead of just saying it like a regular Spanish person, I like zapato, because like to me that's so great. What a great a word that starts with a Z to be your first word.
Yeah, that is pretty like up there. It's like zapato is my first. That's a good one.
Anyway, so it was your first language, and like how were you lived in a house that got dismantled but not physically, just
Right.
the furniture?
Yeah, so it got packed up, and then they moved to Israel, and they took my sister, who was only 12 at the time.
2010.
2013.
Around there, like is 13,
Yeah. So yeah, at the time I was getting my BFA at Cal State Long Beach in printmaking, and it really hit me because like I am a very family-oriented person. And so I started thinking about like all of the furniture that I grew up with and like my surroundings and like this home that I grew up in. And now I don't really have somewhere to go back during the summer, or like just the idea of my parents, my family moving so far away and not being able to access them by like a quick drive up, the freeway. So that made me.
And also it's not like the easiest, place to travel to, right?
Yeah.
Like although if you take, what was the airline that they mentioned in that movie in Rain Man? Dustin Hoffman wants to ride the safest airline, and it's the Israeli one.
El Al.
El Al, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the
Because
Israeli
they have
airport,
like crazy fucking security.
Yeah. Well, they put like an not an IDF soldier, but they put someone on every single one of those planes that go out and in. That is like, if something happens, there's someone there to kind of take care of it.
So it's not just a trip to France.
Oh no,
Yeah.
it's very secure. The airport in Tel Aviv, Ben Gurion, is like the most secure airport. Like it's really funny actually, because when I traveled recently, so I come in and out of that airport, and they come and ask you while you're waiting in line to get your tickets. There are strictly soldiers there that come and ask you like, who packed your bags? Have your bags been in your site the whole time? Where are you headed? What are you going to be doing? This and that, all these questions. And like, you really feel like you're being interrogated almost like, so you feel secure or you feel intimidated. And then you go to some other airport like JFK, and there's just like people like waving you over, like whatever. There's bags sitting on the counter over there. Doesn't feel as secure as it is in
well, have you ever been to Fiumicino in Rome?
No.
That was an airport. Like, there's been some pretty bad terrorism in Rome, specifically at that airport. I mean, I think if you Google it, it's like it's pretty historic. It's one of those like big ones, kind of like that you used to hear a lot about when they talked about the Middle East more. And then talked about how evil Hamas and all those fuckers were. Yeah. Fuckers. I'm sorry. I didn't mean like fuckers, but like, you know, how they frame. Sometimes I say a statement in the voice of the person and then I realize, oh shit, I can get canceled for that.
Yeah.
No, I have no opinions on Hamas, especially in this episode, because I don't want to get you in trouble. Yeah. But yeah, the Fiumicino airport, like that's where I got used to all of that security there. And again, I would fly literally from Fiumicino to JFK, and when I got to JFK, it was like laxed. Yeah, you know, I would go through the TWA terminal, that like super sci-fi one that's now a hotel. Oh, I used to actually use it there, and there were like these like sort of Gucci style desk setups that had TVs, and it was the most sci-fi shit I had ever seen. This was like in the 80s. And then we would have Haagen-Dazs, and I was like, oh my God, the ice cream over here is just so much butterier, and like because it's gelato versus that, it's like cream. Yeah. I was partial to gelato. But going back to the Russian doll thing, though, I mean, those are things that definitely play into this historical trauma thing that generational trauma. And it's interesting because I think the way that people talk about generational trauma is not only just like what your parents hand down from their worldview and stuff like that, but like there's literally an infrastructure around this history that is, I can relate a little bit, because like you were saying that you can't like drive back home. Like, my back home is Miami, which is like where all the right-wing Cubans are.
Oh man.
You know?
Yeah.
And so like I have a weird relationship to being Cuban, because like I don't know any leftist Cubans, you know? And so my perception of are people that are like credit card rich and like, you know, very money oriented in Miami, whereas like Cuban culture is much broader than that, you know? Yeah. So it's interesting when it becomes issue of international concern. I'm not going to use imperialism because I don't.
Yes, we'll keep it neutral.
We'll keep it so neutral. Yeah, no, you're my guest, and I don't want to. You know, I definitely respect that you're not any more responsible for some of the horrible things that Israel does than you are for America. So
sure,
you know, but I also don't want to like make you talk about things that might make you have weird conversations at home. But the historical side of it is interesting. So, okay, so tell me, like, when you're a kid and you're growing up in this environment with people that have experienced this level of suffering and legit persecution, like, what is that experience like? Like, how do you pick up on that as a kid?
Well, it was really interesting, actually. In 8th grade, I went on a trip to the East Coast, and they took us to the Holocaust Museum in DC. And I remember when we went in there, I was already a little bit like, you know, okay, I'm about to go through and kind of see a lot of the history in a museum format, so it's going to be pretty powerful and impactful. And by the time we got into like, I don't know, an hour into our tour, I was like, I can't even like stand anymore. Like I have to sit down. And I called my mom and I was crying, and I was like, I remember just seeing, you know, there were videos that they would play of just people standing in front of a trench and being shot. And I was just like visualizing my family, you know, just like, I can't believe this happened in such a large scale. And it's hard thinking about these things. And my mom doesn't really talk about it, you know. It's like that's part of the trauma, is like it's not really a family discussion to have, or I guess it depends on who your parent is and how they handle it, and how they decide to teach their kids about it. And so it's kind of like this weird, not forbidden territory, but because it's important to know what happens and what happened to your your parents and relatives. But I think the more I get into thinking about my family history, the more I think of like how important it is and how that trauma relates to, in not a direct way, but in a way that can show up in my art. And it's not so much about like the suffering that I want to document in my work. It's more about like the fact that it does go through generations and shows up. And it just makes me more aware of who I am as a person today and how I can relate to certain things. But I don't know, I guess my work isn't really political at all.
No, but I mean, you can definitely have a ripple of that show up, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting how those also ideas become generative and metaphorical in practice, right? Like where you're not necessarily, I mean, I don't make political work and I talk a lot of shit about politics.
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
you know,
yeah.
yeah. So it's not, I don't necessarily like, I think the idea, there's a lot of shit that comes from academia about art that I think is becoming outdated because so few people can work as like have their MFAs, or, you know, you're a very rare example of someone that teaches without a MFA, and tenured people aren't retiring. So there's not like, I don't know, but if there will be any jobs by the time.
Yeah, that's a whole nother like world. It's really interesting. I don't know. It's like the further we get into it, and I might be biased because of my background of only having a BFA, but it's like, is it the paper or is it the experience that is more valuable for someone coming into a teaching position? You know, there's so many people that go and get their MFA and like, good for them. They went through the program, they made the work, but then like, what about the person that has more experience actually instructing you on how to develop a process and how to do it correctly? And I don't know.
Just because you play soccer doesn't mean you can coach it.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Like, it is but I think I think that a lot of the things that I learned, you know, it's also part of just rebelling against your education, right? And like the orthodoxy. But I feel like there is sort of a very, you know, for example, like part of abstract expressionism was like propaganda for the US. My understanding is like, look at how free we are and all of that. So like, this idea of purity, or this idea of like your work has to represent, you know, like I think that it's a very antiquated way of thinking to think that like art is going to change the world. You know,
interesting.
Do you think it has the power to do that?
I think that we need to invest in art at a much younger level, and I think then it can change the world.
So you don't, I don't disagree with that. I think that if more people were educated in critical thought and in art making, I think the world would be a better place. Sure. I was speaking more in terms of like, I'm going to make a painting that's going to change the world.
Oh, yeah.
Which meant you could argue that maybe Guernica was important, but I don't think it changed the world. I think it changed people's perception of things. So I think that can be powerful, but change the world, you're not going to fucking stop people. You're not stopping Bezos with a painting.
No, that's an interesting
Here, Bezos, think about this.
Wow. Yeah. No, that's a really interesting thing to think about. Because I would say like things that change the world would be technology and medicine, or like the invention of the internet. Like that really changed the world. But it's true, like what you just said, it changes people's perspective. So it's more of a long-term change. It's not like an instant, like, you know, we see this painting and then
That's what the Democrats sell us, incrementalism, but it's like...
Well, it's true, because, you know, humans are they struggle with change. Like,
well, it's true in painting. I don't think it's true in art. I don't think the Democrats are doing shit.
Yeah, that's a whole nother can of worms, too.
But no. Anyway, back to painting.
Sure.
The safe harbor of not talking politics. I'm so sick of it. I'm so burnt out of it. And then also, like, I'm limited in how much I can talk about like I'm limited in my scope. So
sure. Yeah, same.
So if I talk about politics every episode, I'm only gonna say the same shit over again.
For sure.
So
cut it out.
but no, and but I do think, I mean, I guess it is a political discussion to talk about like academia and how it has maybe had a negative impact. I do think it's had a pretty negative impact on art in terms of how we consume it, how we think about it, how elitist it is in some certain respects, and part of doing this is just kind of like dispelling all of that shit for me. You know, this is my MFA.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I love that. Yeah, no, that's the thing is I totally agree. Academia, especially for like MFA level, is more about like, okay, how do we get you in the gallery? Or, you know, like, oh, you're not doing it right, think this way instead, or however you want to take it really. With printmaking, I think that printmaking is such a community-based process and technique and world that it kind of gets rid of a lot of this like, oh, you have to think this way or you have to use these materials. It's more about just exploring your creative intuitions in many different formats. And the whole concept of like community in printmaking is that oftentimes you need a press to print, right? And so getting a press is very expensive, and like building a studio just for yourself is kind of like, I might as well go and find a community shop where I can share a press and also interact with other printmakers.
Yeah.
And so that's what I love so much about printmaking, kind of like, regardless of if it's in an academia field or just like a community shop, you come in and you learn a practice, and it's more about like honing in your skills as a person, your creative juices, and being able to break this idea of like, oh, well, you're not making the print correctly. There is no correct way to really make a print. There's a process that you have to follow, but then you can do whatever you want. And something that John Greco, the owner of Josephine Press, my mentor in a sense, says like, printmaking is all about problem solving. And so again, it's like you don't have to fit into a certain box to be making a successful print, I guess. That kind of relates to
No.
Yeah.
I'm following.
Yeah.
That's the first time you got self-conscious. So that's pretty good. We're 40 minutes in.
Cool. I'm just thinking like, is this relating enough? Yeah.
No. Well, I mean, I think that then that goes into like, how do you like, you know, going back. I do like the structure of the Russian doll thing of like, and then now if we're thinking not like we're basically inheriting an industry, right? With ideological things that people have taught you, and then it's your choice to sort of accept them or rebel against them, and all of that. But I do think it is an interesting history, right? Because it's like, it always, you know, I mean, aside from the obvious, like, let's acknowledge them, the white male, you know, straight, all of those things. But I guess going back to orthodoxy, right? Like, orthodoxy used to be in the Renaissance very different than in the classical period, right? It's always interesting. Like, what I like about looking at classical work, which a lot of people don't do that much anymore, but I think is actually pretty interesting to go back and look at it, because it contextualizes how things are cyclical, right? Because if you look at like the Hellenistic period is like the dopest of the most detailed of the Greeks, and then it kind of happens again in the Renaissance, where it just kind of starts like people just refine it more. It's always funny, like when you go over there and you're like, this is the second closest to being full perspective, you know, where they're like figuring out perspective drawing, but like one line is off.
Yeah.
And oh, this is the official first, you know, and like, but it's like, yeah, that's how it started, right? It started really fucking basic.
Yeah.
And then you have cameras come in, it changes everything. It's just such an interesting, like, how you inherit this dogma and these biases, right? And then you're like, and then you start to question them sometimes.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
I don't know. What do you feel like you like, what kind of modality of working? Like, for me, I'll lead the way. For me, the Dadas were really like fucking exciting for me. I mean, I had seen like Calder and all these people that made fun work, and it wasn't dour, you know, where it was like not bitter.
Yeah.
And then it kind of goes dark, you know, because then you have the photo montage stuff from the Berlin Dada. But for me, that was like, oh, especially because Dada was like a reaction to like the craziness of everything going on. So I don't know. Was there anything that resonated with you like that you were like, oh shit? Like, I think I forget his name. Anyway.
You know, honestly, that's something that I'm lacking from getting my MFA is not.
Well, I just have a BFA.
For sure.
Yeah, okay.
No, I mean, like, in regards to your question of like, do I kind of look at a certain style or era of art and like relate to that? It's something that I'm still kind of exploring. I am also really into Dada, but I guess more in like an overall just like printmaking. And I think it's because like I teach printmaking, and so I talk a little bit about the history of each process too. So I'm thinking more about like process rather than style or.
What is your favorite process? Out of all the printmaking, if you had to choose one,
if I had to choose,
what's your favorite song? Who's your favorite band?
I would say at the moment it's etching,
Etching,
intaglio printing. Yeah, there's something really beautiful about doing like a aqua tint on a plate, which is like establishing different values.
I can tell you something about intaglio.
Please.
It's an Italian word.
Perfect. Thank you.
Well, I'm sure you know more about the history. I was just getting you rolling.
For sure, yeah. Well, if you want to know a little bit of history, the whole like reason we have Durr making millions of plates and is such like a big name, and Rembrandt and all this and that is like, so etching came about because when we used to have armor, there would be, you know, a certain design or someone's signature on the armor that wanted to be replicated or recorded. And so they would ink up that sheet of armor and then press paper to it and create a print. And so artists then realized like, oh, this is a thing that is possible. And so they started working with flat sheets of metal and would draw.
Do you know what centuries we're talking about? Or it's okay if you don't know.
No,
I mean, we're talking armor, so
I should.
No, you should. It's fine. I just have questions, and it's fine if you don't have the answers.
Oh no, it's making me a bad teacher.
It's the format of the show. That's why. That's the downfall of having non-experts talk about things they like.
I suppose, yeah. But I should know. But
well, I mean, not that you're not an expert on printmaking. On the history, I'll give you a pass.
Yeah. Okay, good.
but that's interesting. Are there any other quirky like histories of print? Because that's fucking funny. Like I would have never guessed. It's like it reminds me. I mean, just completely unrelated, but it reminds me of Indiana Jones and like when they take the pens and
create rubbings. And
yes, stuff. Rubbings. That's what it's called.
Yeah.
It's been so long since grade school.
Other little quirky. I don't know. There's so much with.
Well, then, what do you like about the process? Is it the intaglio? That's where you're etching with acids, right? You're using zinc. You said.
Yeah, so you can either use zinc or copper. Zinc is a little more toxic because you have to use nitric acid, and copper is using ferric chloride, which is basically salts. But what do I love so much about the process? I love the fact that there is a process. Like you have to go through all these steps. You have to polish the plate. You have to put the ground on. You have to transfer your drawing over to the plate, and then you draw it into the ground, and then you have to etch your plate. And there's like all these different things you can do while you're etching it. Like you can.
But you've already done a drawing, right?
Yes, you have to.
Okay. That's like I was like tying it into like ceramicists where they like have the most fucking crazy patience and their pieces blow up and they're still good. But I can relate to having a drawing and wanting to actualize it as a print.
Yes.
No, because if it was just the process without like having an endpoint, I think that would be pretty tough for me.
Oh no.
I'm just talking more about the differences in art and art practices. Cause like I find that interesting too, you know, like how different people, like what gets people riled up.
Oh, okay. I think I get what you're saying. I mean, with I don't have much experience with ceramics, but I can relate to like the idea, the tactile,
no.
messy.
Yeah, I paint, and then, like when I'm painting, I'm using tape, clean lines, and then I have like a little, basically like one of those little film canisters, and I use that for my water.
Nice.
So that I don't make too much water, and then I pour it into my trash can that has a bunch of paper in it, so that I don't pour it down my drain.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I should have just Googled how to properly dispose of this stuff, but anyway, I like neat.
Yes, I get you. Printmaking might be a little difficult for you then because it does get pretty inky and messy. And it's funny when I teach at the university, I get a lot of non-art students And so there was one semester where I had a student come in with like a business suit on because he was a business major. And I was like, you are not going to be wearing that when we're going to be inking plates and dealing with like all these, really dirty materials.
Yeah.
And like all of, not all, but a lot of the folks that have their nails painted and such at the end of the class, ink will get under your fingernails. And so they're like scrubbing their nails in the sink.
You're not a manicure person?
No, there's no possibility of keeping that going.
They don't look too bad though.
Well, I haven't touched ink in a couple days. So.
Okay.
But definitely like I'll come home after teaching a workshop and there will be ink like all over my arms, and it's part of it.
But I think I can handle your studio's not too messy.
For sure. Well,
there's ink is different than like breathing in fucking,
yeah, that's part of it too.
Sanded down like ceramics. Oh wait, you do breathe in stuff?
Well, so with an aqua tint, you have to blow rosin up into this box called an aqua tint box, and rosin's not very good for you to breathe in.
Okay.
It's basically tree sap, but you don't want that stuff to go into your lungs in big capacities. So there's that, and then nitric acid is not something that you really want to be breathing in either. So
yeah, but that makes me feel like a scientist.
Yeah.
I want a lab coat and just like
yes. Not quite like that, but there's definitely chemistry.
Stop breaking my dreams with reality.
You come in the shop and you can experience.
I'll just have some baking soda and what is it, vinegar, and then just like make my own little volcano on the side
for sure. You can get the real feeling.
So I'm like, I got the pre-Christmas of printmaking.
Yes.
Well, that's great. I mean, I definitely enjoy your love of it. Like it definitely it's communicated, even though we're not necessarily. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of like. I think you're the first printmaker that talks about printmaking that I've had on the show, and I've had done 140. I'm actually kind of embarrassed.
Wow. Well, it's about time.
But yeah, it's about time, man. I need to represent more art types.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sure there's someone listening right now and being like, yeah, I know exactly what she's talking about. Oh, I'm making them like addicts in my reenactment. But like, yeah, I mean, that is kind of the thing. It's funny, those little things that even though you have different practices, you relate to. Is like, oh, this person really likes this.
Yeah, I mean, it really is my passion, and my art career is revolving around printmaking, and the reason I love teaching it is because I am so passionate about it, and I'm able to even during the workshops that I teach at Josephine Press, I'll explain every single step that's happening and going to happen and has happened, and it's probably too much information for someone just learning and just needs to get to the next step, but it's like I know how to explain what's happening here, so let me just tell you. And I think so. I listen to some other printmaking podcasts, and it's what you're just explaining of when the printmaker starts talking about a specific process, it's like, yes, I
it's
visualize
like you're watching a chef cook and you're like, yeah, put the butter in.
Exactly. It's like, oh my God, it's going to be so good. I'm so excited to see the print and all this and that.
And in terms of iconography, is there something that we can talk about there without having to describe that? I mean, because I see some plants stuff, some butterfly stuff, what is that symbol? I've seen that.
The Khamsa?
Hamsa. What is that?
The Khamsa is basically, so I have a bunch of Khamsas as keychains. It's basically like a prayer for being safe, security.
I'm guessing Hamsa is in Hebrew?
Yeah, Khamsa is, I don't know what it translates to exactly. I should know, but it's basically like the eye at the bottom is the evil eye. And so the hand. Yeah. So Khamsa is like Chamesh in Hebrew is 5. So Khamsa relates to the hand, 5 fingers. There's 2 thumbs on
side. I was going to comment on that.
Yeah. So the pinky doesn't quite. And so the hand being inside the Khamsa is it's the protector against the evil eye. And there's a lot of decorative elements that go into the Khamsa in Israeli culture, like pomegranates or fish. There's the 7 spices of Israel, of which those 2 are a part of. And so it's
is there are you making a distinction, or is it just casual, or is it a synonym for the difference between Israeli culture and Jewish culture?
Well, so the khamsa is also shown in like Indonesian culture,
Okay.
or like, so it pops up in different places on our planet and such. So, but the overall theme of it is like it's a protective element or symbol
Mhm.
against the evil eye. Typically, is there is like that.
And
eye.
the idea being that the eye is contained within the hand, so that's like you're holding it.
It's
or?
like repelling against it in a
Okay.
way. So, like, have you seen the evil eye on its own? It's like
The triangle one.
it's usually like a circle, and then it has like the 3 rings, and it's usually blue. I don't think
Is this
have one here.
Kabbalah shit?
No,
No,
it's
okay.
just
It's not mysticism.
You know, it might be. I probably need to do more research.
No, it's fine. I mean, I don't know. I'm asking questions a bit like I'm basically like, hey, I've heard of pizza. Is this pizza?
Yeah. You know, honestly, like I've been using it a lot more because it's just something that is like a motif in my life of like having a keychain, growing up around it in Israeli culture. And now I'm starting to think about using it more in my work. Like I can talk more about the pomegranate that I have within the khamsa, which is another kind of decorative motif in Israeli culture. So I kind of like look at the symbols and then incorporate them into my work in that sense. And then they relate to me because of their, Israeli history and all that. But I lost my train of thought.
That's okay. It happens. I do that all the time. Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. The pomegranate, and then spider webs and stuff.
Yeah.
So it seems like it's. I mean, when I'm looking at the stuff, I definitely like even your butterflies are kind of poignant. You know, they're like, oh, I'm a girl, I love butterflies. They're like almost moth-like. You know, is that intentional, or am I picking up on something, or is that just coincidence?
Yeah, well, I'm definitely not going for like, here's a pretty butterfly as a print. And I'm actually trying to stop the motif of the monarch. I started it during lockdown when I like would go on a walk a lot during lockdown, and I would see like the monarch kind of flying around. And it became a symbol for me of like this idea that it's able to fly away and like travel distances. And so I related it to how like my parents are so far, my parents and my sister. And like having the ability for the butterfly to just fly and get where it needs to go. That kind of inserted itself into my work. But then I had a meeting with my my instructors from Long Beach because I was actually applying to grad schools at the time, and I was showing them my most recent work, and the butterfly was in a lot of it, and they were like, "What's up with this butterfly?" I was like, I honestly, I don't really think I know what I'm doing with it either.
Well, unfortunately, it is one of those symbols that has so much baggage. It's almost like you putting a Hello Kitty, kind of, but
No,
not
I
really.
get what you're saying.
Yeah, like I don't mean that as a dig.
No.
I actually don't think I mean, it doesn't feel girly to me. So that's why, like, it feels almost like more historically, or yeah, historical yeah, that. Let's do that one. Let's make up the word like that. And then, but I do think that there is I do find that pomegranate, the hands thing that you're doing, where it's basically a hand break. It's a drawing of two hands breaking up a pomegranate. There's something really interesting about that, and even with the. There's a lyrical thing to it, which it reminds me of the photography that you brought up, because I think that, what's his name, Kerouac on Robert Frank's book talked about how photography is lyrical, not narrative. And so I see, even though we have the 3 hands, like the 3 stages of the hands opening, and there is a narrative in there, it's still sort of poetic, right? It's still sort of like, so it's interesting in terms of using printmaking. It's so much. It's just like more elaborate drawing, essentially, right? Like,
yeah, well, so like
drawing with extra steps.
And then the capacity to make multiples. So that's the big thing that also separates printmaking from other medias. And like the whole idea of being able to make multiples is to be able to reach a wider audience, right? So like when the printing press was invented, we're able to actually send news and communications out to further distances rather than just like having a scribe have to write it once or twice and post it around town. Now we're able to really carry it wherever.
Took their jobs. All the poor scribes out there.
They then became printmakers and they continued their practice, but to a more efficient degree.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But I love the idea of being able to make multiples. And, you know, I teach my students like a big perk of it is being able to show in multiple galleries or like sell to multiple people. And like prints are more affordable than a single painting, right? You think of the Mona Lisa, you have to go to visit it all the way in
Paris.
Yeah, in France. Versus prints of the Mona Lisa, or I guess, for example, like Edward Munch's the Scream lithograph. There's many lithographs, so you could go to this place or that place and you can acquire one, and then someone else can also have one in this gallery. So that's also like a really nice luxury of printmaking, is being able to make multiples and spread your art and communications further.
It's interesting too, because I wonder if like printmaking before photography was considered a high art form. Is it? Do you know if this like what it as the same as painting and whatnot? Okay, I mean, I'll finish what I'm leading to, which is the idea that photography sort of is one of the ways that printmaking became like, because since by nature it is a reproducible image, like people were selling prints of it as opposed to like painting, there's only one, right? Yeah. So do you know anything about this? Was photography validating to printmaking at all? Or am I just like making it up right now on the spot and it sounds like a great story?
Well, so photography plays into printmaking too. So there's like photo etchings, photogravure, photolithographs. So with the invention of photography, it kind of plays into it. But I wouldn't say that printmaking ever was like higher than photography in terms of like thinking of levels, or the painting has always been like the most up there on the pyramid, I guess, if you were to
in the hierarchy.
Yeah.
In the,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In what we consider.
In what academia thinks is great.
Yeah. But yeah, printmaking was more about communication rather than like fine art. But with Rembrandt and Durer and all these folks, those prints would sell too. They just wouldn't be sold to the capacity of if you had a painting up at the salon or something like that. So Durer would be commissioned to make like really big prints or prints for people of high establishment and whatnot. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
No, it's totally no. That I mean, it does. It kind of does. Yeah, because I just had no real historical context for printmaking to begin with. Sure. So like just hearing about whenever the armor was made, I'm gonna look that up.
Yeah.
Intaglio. When was it invented? I can tell you. I can teach you something else about Italian.
Please.
Graffiti comes from the word graffito, which is graffare, which is to scratch. So like graffiti is originally like that shit that you see when you go on tourist like holidays and you see people like write, "I love you, Emma," but like they scraping it in, or like when you scrape it, like that's like legit where the term graffiti, it's like even more defacing. You can't paint over it.
Yeah. Scratched into like the trunk of the tree or whatnot.
Or like it's actually crazy how often you go to like historical landmarks and they'll just be like a fresco with fucking shit scratched into it. It's pretty crazy.
It's pretty upsetting.
Yeah. But you know what? I mean, there's no accounting for assholes.
I guess so. Yeah.
Well, this has been fun. Is there anything else that I should ask you about? Maybe a point about Russian Doll that you haven't gotten to make?
Oh.
That we could end on?
Well, I don't know. There's like so much, I guess, like stuff that we didn't really touch on that I would have liked to have brought up.
We can keep going.
No.
We've been in for an hour, so I don't want to take your time.
However.
I'm just pivoting to I you know.
Yes.
I am wrapping up, but we can wrap up for like an hour if you want.
No. Okay. However, I feel like what we've talked about has been great so far.
Yeah. No, for sure. Well, a lot of times if I go over an hour, it's because like I just want to make sure I have enough stuff. So at this point, I know I have enough stuff.
Awesome.
And then we can just keep talking.
Sure.
But if there were things that you didn't get in that first hour out, go for it.
No, I'm just thinking of like the one thing that from Russian Doll that maybe we didn't really get so much into is like the cognitive side of it all, of thinking about like having to think about your trauma and your history, your family history, and like who you are as a person today. And like some other themes that my work touches on is how you relate to like who you are with your surroundings, and how like your memories of what you have experienced in the past based on just how you're growing up and your environment and your parental sort of upbringing and all that, and how that relates to your furniture, your things that you're surrounded by, and then how that comes back into you as a person. So kind of like this loop of all that and how it affects you cognitively moving forward as well. It's kind of more.
So that's related? That seems like it may be a thought that came out when your grandparents moved, then, or to Israel, where you no longer had the artifacts of what it meant to be you as a family.
Yeah.
That you didn't buy yourself. You just grew up around.
Right.
Interesting point.
Yeah. So like in undergrad, the work that I was making related a lot to like the furniture that I grew up with and like the family home that I grew up in, and how that relates then to all this.
Oh, so then you were like, wait, where's all my source material?
Yeah, in a way. Or it was just like, oh, my, like a piece of me left, because I was so tied to that object, or like I was so comforted by that object, that space that I grew up in. And so like with Russian Doll, I'm trying to see if there's like a nice link between the two, but I don't know, it's more so about your family history. And
I mean, you don't have to tie it to Russian Doll.
Sure.
Russian Doll is just the jumping point.
For sure. Yeah.
But it is actually a pretty handy one, because it is like, I've never even seen the show. You
have to.
No, I will check it out. I actually don't have Netflix right now. Because I don't do Netflix unless there's something that I'm like, that's like, I've been waiting, but then I pick up other shit along the way.
Sure.
But yeah, it's so expensive now.
Yeah.
It's like not worth it. And then HBO is trying to be like them now too, which sucks, because they're just trying to buy stuff instead of make their own content.
Oh, for sure.
Anyway, streaming. Oh, the generational trauma of capitalism on our entertainment.
Our entertainment and leisure.
Oh my God, what a burden life can be. No, that is interesting. And I do think that there's like one word that surprisingly hasn't come up is nostalgia, which I think is maybe overused, which is probably good. But I mean, at this point, it feels safe to bring it up because we are kind of in that space.
Yeah.
Right. Where it's like a nostalgia. But I do feel like, for example, which is in frame, I'm going to point to that, the dead flowers. Mm-hmm. They're so sad, but there's like nostalgia. And then those flowers, they're kind of like the other ones next to it with the butterflies. They're kind of waking up. They're kind of still alive. There's like some vibrancy. It's really interesting. I'm a huge fan of drawing, and I definitely like, we've talked a lot about your printmaking, but your drawing skills are really actually pretty impressive.
Thank you.
Do you have like mental cannons in your head that you can like draw, like, or do you have to actually see, like, are those hands drawn from memory or are they drawn from a reference?
Yeah, from reference.
Okay. I'm feel less bad about my ability to draw.
No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't at all.
Because I'm reference only. I can only draw from reference.
Yeah.
I can draw really well from reference.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm getting defensive about this.
No, you shouldn't. I mean, don't compare yourself to. But anyways.
No, but I'm always impressed with people that can do that because it's like a completely different skill set. I think,
You have to practice it for sure. Yeah. That's definitely part of it. I mean, I was lucky my parents would like send me to art camp and like take art classes and such while I was in high school. So I think my drawing skills picked up when they sent me to that. And it really is something that you have to practice in order to keep up and all that. But
I actually, the other day I pulled out a drawing and I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, there you go.
And I had a deadline and I was procrastinating and I was like, you can do it. You can do it. And then I just did it. It's the easiest is what it kind of drawing to me is when you're just rubbing a piece of paper with that pencil and you're just letting it pick up instead of drawing lines.
For sure. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
could just erase the shit out of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, look at that. Look at that. Look at that. I was like flexing too.
Nice. Nice. I mean, yeah. I mean, take pride in the work that you make, you know?
Yeah. No, I need to draw more because it made me feel really good about myself.
Good. Good.
Yeah.
That's what art should be.
Yeah.
But I forget nostalgia. Okay.
Yeah.
So really quick little thing on nostalgia. So I read this book recently that was called Nostalgia and the Immigrant Identity.
Mm-hmm.
And it related so when we say nostalgia in today's age, a lot of folks think like, oh, the 80s,
Yeah.
retro, gumball machines, whatever. But if you think of nostalgia as the way that this book was talking about it was like, nostalgia is all about what you, as an immigrant, what you are remembering from the past space that you grew up in. So, you know, someone that immigrants from Europe to America, and then they have nostalgia of their life in a previous location and what that was like and the type of culture that you're surrounded by and the types of foods that you eat and the people that you interact with compared to where we are today, for example, in America or what have you, and how you don't have access to that anymore. So nostalgia does play a big role in my work. I'm trying to shift it more towards that bigger picture, but it did do a lot with like family photo albums. So when my parents moved, my parents and my sister, I scanned a bunch of like photos from my parents' photo albums, and I thought a lot about like who I was during that time, being surrounded by all these objects. And, you know, I'm the firstborn of my parents, so I'm the oldest sister. And so they gave me everything. You know, when you're the firstborn, your parents want like to just totally invest in you 100%. So there's so many photos of me as a kid, like every single day practically. And so I thought a lot about how like photography relates to capturing these memories and how when you look at them as someone that's older, looking at yourself from a different time, it's like all these memories flood you. And thinking of nostalgia, this book talks about it in the way that you're an immigrant moving from one location to another, but then me as a person, who I was during that time versus who I am today is nostalgic to think about, and how the life that I lived moving forward shaped me to who I am today, and then comparing what I had in the past to what I have now, and like where am I going to go in the future, and like what will my kids think of when they look back at pictures of me and pictures of themselves being my age today, and just like goes on and on.
Yeah, well, it is interesting because to some degree it's like the 80s doesn't exist anymore either.
Sure. Oh man, we're moving forward.
Right? Like whatever that was, there's no going back. It doesn't exist. It's like that Beatles song.
Oh man.
The one that makes you sad.
Yeah.
That's really interesting though. Yeah, it is. It is hard, especially like the idea that your consciousness is continuous, right? Since that point to now, but it's like just hard to even conceive the entirety of it. Like I think I get caught into these like thought patterns where I'm like simplifying my life to like highlights of it, right? Or like, and it's like, no, man, it's 42 fucking years, dude. Like, there's been a lot of boredom. There's been a lot of like everything, like everything has filled this time, not just this like conglomerate of or network of ideas that I'm using to define myself. It really is crazy. And then like you forget shit about yourself, and then you remember and you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, the brain remembers things more when there's like periods of activity. So if there is a lot more of downtime, or like, you know, you're just kind of like living a routine life, your brain isn't going to remember those things as much as they would when you went on vacation, or you had like a really great date with someone or something like that, you know? So it's
like when every time I go hiking, I think about all the times I've been hiking.
There you go. Yeah.
Am I the only one that does that? Please, someone comment down below. Don't make me feel weird.
No, yeah, I agree. And then like maybe you have a flashback to like that ice cream that you got afterwards or something. And then that relates too, you know? It's all interesting stuff.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I have really enjoyed meeting you. We have definitely followed each other for a long time, and I also appreciate you because you followed me after I lost my account.
Oh no, is that what happened? No, I'm really into like what you're doing, and I love like I said while you were setting up, like I'm so impressed with your setup, and I appreciate you giving me the time to be with you and chat with you. And
I mean, this has been a true pleasure, and then I'll have Yeltsin too, so that there is no jealousy between couples. That is one of the rules from the show. If I have somebody and they're dating an artist, they have to be on the show.
Good.
I don't want any drama. I don't want to be responsible for breakups, guys.
Oh man, yeah. Well, you better get him on. No, that's great.
But he'll be after in the fall.
Nice.
I'm waiting to schedule. I mean, I'll schedule him right now for like October, but
Awesome.
I mean, if he's down.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, this is lovely, and it's nice to see. Like, I like coming down to the artist co-op. I would like to maybe, if you know any other Long Beach people that aren't in this space, it would be cool too, so that I can get to meet them.
Oh yeah.
But it is also nice to like just kind of. This seems like a little oasis for you guys.
Totally. It is. I mean, that's something that's a big benefit of having a studio outside of where you live, is like being able to separate yourself from home life and work life and come to your own space where you can pin stuff up on the wall and just have supplies and then just like indulge, and get into it. The co-op, Yelton and I joined, I think it's been 2 years now. And we've slowly developed the space, and, you collect things over time as artists do. And you get in here and you get inspired by something, or like you're really driven to finish something that you've been thinking about while you were at work. And
there's no TV or video games in this space.
That's right. Yeah. That's for home. That's for relaxing. This is a workspace.
Yeah. I play a lot of video games.
Nice. It's good. That's good too.
I mean, yeah, I also work hard. I need to get out of the mindset that I'm a man child just because I play video games. But that is kind of the culture that I grew up in the 80s. It's a generational thing. I think if I was Yeltsin's age, I'm assuming that he's your age.
Yeah, we're close. Yeah.
It would be a very different relationship to my, I'm always like, I could be painting. I could be,
that's interesting.
I've been having this conversation about transhumanism with somebody, and I've come to the conclusion that it's going to be a nightmare because all it does is keep you trapped in capitalism for the rest of existence.
Yeah.
Like for all eternity. Imagine you get uploaded to a computer, and I would like some peace from the sales.
Yeah. I mean, that's really interesting. Do you feel like you have that mindset of like, oh, I should be working right now instead of playing video games because of how you were raised, or because of how society says?
I mean, there's always going to be guilt.
Wow.
I think part of it is like, I mean, I'm not actively Catholic. I'm agnostic, but I'm traumatized. That's my trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think that. Also, I mean, we live in the U.S. We live in a capitalist system. I think there's a lot of different things that add up to that, Yeah. And then, yeah, I mean, like today I'm definitely not going to do shit.
You should. You worked, and then you deserve a break and to relax. Yeah.
But generally speaking, I'm pretty tough on myself in terms of work output, even though I put out a weekly podcast, I make art, I have a job, or I'm looking for work now, but I do work full time. So I don't know. I mean, I've done therapy. I should maybe get back in to deal with some of this stuff, but we'll see. We'll see.
I think society gives you a big load to carry in this idea of like, oh, I should be productive right now, because we live in this world of like, if you're not working, then like, what are you doing? But that's all propaganda.
And that's why they didn't give us anything when like they gave us $1,200 while the rest of the world got they got to keep their jobs because the government paid for them.
Right.
So yeah, and the economy didn't completely collapse. It's like it is. They are very, very much about making us work harder for them.
Totally.
I don't think Bezos wants me. I think Bezos is okay with, and Musk. I don't want to pick on Bezos. Fucking farmland owner Bill Gates is an asshole too.
Oh man.
I'm sorry. I don't want to get you kicked out of Israel because
no.
I don't know if they like are huge donors to.
I don't know either. Actually.
Yeah, I could totally see that, some weird shit like that. All right. Yes. Thank you so much for doing this. Anything that we can promote for you? You are May Roded, Roded.
Yes, that's it. Yeah. May Roded, MAYD or MAY.RODED on Instagram. My website is mayroded.com. And what can you promote for me? Come to Josephine Press, take a workshop with me.
Oh, for sure.
Learn how to make a print.
I might do that. Yeah,
Please do. Yeah. It's literally for anyone. You don't have to have any printmaking experience. And I promise you'll leave feeling really fulfilled and with handmade work at the end of the day, which is my mission.
Cool. And then you get to
educator.
reproduce your favorite drawing.
That's right.
Over and over and over again.
And
which
then
is pretty special.
give it all your friends and family. So
yeah. All right. And we'll be back next week with another great guest with another crazy topic. And maybe we'll talk about art.
nice.